The question of the day: who will win the Canadian election, Pierre Poilevre or Mark Carney, or in other words, the Conservative Party of Canada or the Liberal Party of Canada? In this video today, in the next hour, I'm going to delineate who's going to win and why. I'm going to be using some of my best astrology tools, including Horary, solar arc, solar return, transits on election day, and some common sense. However, just understand that this is my best attempt as an astrologer to look at the election results from the lens of a predictive astrological sky. I may be wrong. I also have a personal bias in this election that I will disclose what that bias is as we get going. And I will do my very best to let that bias sit over here with my crow on the side. This is my crow that I've had for like 20 years. And I just thought, what the heck? We're going to do this together. So he is the crow that's going to keep my bias in check, okay? So that I don't read the sky from a place of hope and rather from a place of clarity. That said, I would like to introduce you to an idea around astrology, divination, and all tools of forecasting the future. It's not one future. There's more than one future. This is a multiverse. We split timelines. Trust me on this. It is the timeline upon which I am sitting on April the 26th, Saturday. I'm recording this video at 12:22 in the afternoon. That is the timeline for what I'm about to say. It's possible there's another timeline in which this is not true. However, in this timeline, so far, so good. This is what I expect to happen on Monday. So a lot of you will be not patient enough to wait to see what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. I understand that. So I will say that the sky, according to my forecast, will favor the win by the Conservative Party. Probably a minority win, not a majority. However, I want to show you the why of that, and so you can understand what I'm looking at, because I could be wrong. And a lot of you are very astrologically astute, and maybe you can help me as well. First of all, it's a big election in Canada. And this is the card, No Place Like Home. No Place Like Home is the card I drew out of this deck, asking, what is this election about in Canada? Well, no kidding, right? Because we are being threatened to become the 51st state by the president of the United States, who called our previous leader, the governor Trudeau. And I'm not even going to read this. Obviously, No Place Like Home just speaks to the ethos of our country and what it's going through. The Conservative Party has a logo about bring it home, and their platform is very conservative. So it's fiscally conservative, less spending, more saving. It is not anti-abortion, in case you thought that. That's not true. That's false propaganda. It's not pro-Trump. It's not MAGA. It's just a normal Canadian fiscally conservative party. We've had them in elections before running our government, and we've had them out of power. Right now, they've been out of power for a decade. The last time the Conservatives were in power, we had a balanced budget. We didn't have a massive federal deficit, but this is the archetype of No Place Like Home, whether people are voting for the Liberal Party or therefore Mark Carney, the interim prime minister. They're doing that because they believe he will fight Trump. Duke it out. The other side, the conservative parties, are not people, and the voters are young people, and they're not so worried about that. They're worried about affordability, worried about taxes. They're worried about crime in their streets. They're worried about rampant immigration policy that led to some of our housing crisis, but that's been pulled back by both parties at this point anyway. And the way I see it, Mercury, which represents young people, and Venus, which represents women, are both in the race. Carney has a stronger support with an exalted Venus natally and Venus transiting over the top of his chart, with women, particularly liberal women over the age of 55, the boomer women are the women who are supporting him. And then we have, which I'm not. I'm a boomer woman and I'm not in favor, but I've never voted in my life. And my name is Lori Lothian, and this is Western Tropical Zodiac Astrology, and welcome to my channel. I've never voted in my entire life, so I'm not political. I've not belonged to parties and stuff. This is like literally me doing the astrology for you. The young people, they're on TikTok. They're begging their parents to vote conservative. They can't afford to live in Canada. They can't afford to buy a house. They're losing hope. They all went to university. They can't get a job. You get the drift. The economies, our gross domestic product, therefore, our standard of living is going on a downslide. We're the worst of 30 industrialized nations. In the G7, we're at the bottom. This is because of a massive ballooned deficit that our country has right now, put in place by 10 years of the Liberal Party, and carbon taxes and stuff. But that's just fact. That's not my opinion. We have this massive deficit. We have this low gross domestic product. We have low standard of living. Now, The win for Carney would require the females to pull it through. The win for Poilievre requires the young people to pull through. It looks like the young people or Mercury have more strength in the chart than the Venus factor. And the reason is, I'll show you the sky, is that on the day or two after the election, Venus goes from 28 degrees to 29 degrees and then falls off a cliff into 0 Aries. Now, normally a Venus going through this top of her cycle exalted after a long retrograde, it's not a big deal. But for Carney, this is happening over his sun in the sign of Pisces. And it literally is like post-election, there's this fall, and the women are his main ticket to success. Yet not only that, the women are coming into the anaretic turbulent degree, Venus turbulence, and drowning, the Gandanta degree at 29 degrees of Pisces, literally the day that the election results will be called, right? The day after the election. So that does not look easy. And then next day on the 30th, Venus falls off the cliff into Mark Carney's 12th house, the 12th house of dungeons and self-undoing and hidden enemies and whatever else. I mean, just a negative house when you're trying to win power. There's a lot of parallel between the election in the United States and the election in Canada. It's eerie. I'll forget some of the parallels, but I'll give you a few. Donald Trump is a Gemini sun. Pierre Poilevre is a Gemini sun, conjunct Mercury, by the way, in Gemini. In perhaps his 12th house, I rectified his chart to a Cancer rising after doing a ton of research on his life. But without knowing his rising, we'll just skip that part for now and say that we see the parallel between the two Gemini leaders, right? Two suns in Gemini. For both Donald Trump and Pierre Poilevre, in June of 2024, Venus came into the heart of the sun, which is a blessing, right on the sun of Mark Carney, right on the star Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, which is a beautiful star for success, mastery, and mastery of communication and being able to succeed in power. So Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, that star is on the sun of Pierre Poilevre. And when Venus joined the sun in June 4th of 2024, it gave him a blessing on his sun. Now, the same blessing also came to Trump, but not right on his sun, but further away, but still up there with Sun, Uranus, North Node for Donald Trump. Second of all, and that Venus star point happens every year in June anyway. It's part of the United States election cycle, but it's just interesting for Pierre Poilevre because it happened on his sun, which represents the part of your chart, this career and leader. And his sun is conjunct Mercury, and Mercury represents not just communication, but people who are young. And so there's a blessing for him with youth and power coming off the Venus star point of June of last year, which is still kind of unfolding through the sky as a possible narrative, particularly until March 22nd, when the next star point happened. So it fueled his rise to this position of competing in this election. Now, another parallel is Kamala Harris was dealing with her 12th house profection age, a difficult age about endings and completions. And then she had her birthday in October and then the election. She moved into her first house age. That should have felt good. I thought maybe that would be a good thing for her. But I recognize in hindsight that when we begin something under the influence of an ending, if you're a numerologist, I think a lot of you know, you shouldn't start something in a 9-year, right? Because it's all going to be a false start. You're here to close doors, complete, tidy up loose ends. And so Carney announced his candidacy and rose to the leader of the Liberal Party in a 12-year. Right. And as for him, is ruled by Mars, ending, cutting, and severing. I'll show you his chart in a minute. And literally that is not positive because even though now, as of his birthday in March, after the election began, or, after he was winner of the Liberal Party race, he still has that same thing that Kamala had, starting something and ending cycle and then having it fizzle out. It could be fizzling out. Number 3, when Mark Carney said, I'm going to announce this, election, we're going to put the election in place. He made the announcement to call for a quick election, a snap election. During the retrograde Mars and the retrograde Venus. Not only was it a retrograde Venus, she was combust the sun, deeply invisible, just coming out of her gazemi. Now, invisible Venus is just that, invisible, but she's also retrograde. Mercury's retrograde. Mercury rules ballots. Venus rules popular public appeal in women. Both were retrograde. And at the time, and I said this in 3 separate videos, this is inauspicious. It shouldn't have been done, because what it means that whatever momentum he had going into the announcement of the election, which was becoming formidable, by the way, it would turn back around and go in the opposite direction, as retrogradations are about turning back the other way and going back. So what was going one way turns around and goes another direction. Indeed, what has happened is we have seen that happen. We've seen that the gap at one point, maybe 8 to 10 point lead for the Liberals, has been doing this ever since Venus and Mercury stationed from retrogradation into direct motion. And as those things have happened, both planets, Mercury and Venus, we have seen this gap between the Liberals and Conservatives close. And now, 2 days before the election, it's neck and neck. Now, someone criticized me and said the Conservatives have never been ahead in the polls. That's not true. There have been some polls that have had the Conservatives eking forward by 1 to 2 or 3 degrees. Okay, or a margin of error. And there are other polls by different pollsters that have the opposite, like 3 or 4 degrees ahead or more for the Liberal Party. So I did not make that up. But the point is, the mean poll, average poll, the gap has gone like this. And now in some polls are tied, and some polls are like 1 or 2 points ahead, apart from each other. The Liberals 2 points ahead. 2 points is a margin of error. That doesn't matter. In other words, it's not enough to call a winner. Second of all, on those polling things, I want to mention there's something called polling bias error. It's hard to account for. It depends on your sample size. Depends on where you're sampling. It depends on if there's a bias called the shy poller, like someone calls up a conservative and they pretend that they're going to vote Liberal. Second thing is that the Liberal Party people who want to vote for them will be a lot of retirees, a lot of boomers, a lot of people have downtime, they're home a lot, they pick up the phone. The Conservative constituency are young people, probably working their ass off at a day job, but also it's the working class, the working guy, the everyday laborer type of thing. They've got a lot of labor unions now endorsing them. And those guys are in the middle of work. Like the plumber's not going to pick up the phone at the toilet for a poll, or doesn't have the time to do the punching their answers into a poll. So you'll have polling bias also. So we really don't know what's going to happen. Blue wave, right? Like you guys were looking for we're different than you. So in Canada, the red color goes with the Liberal Party and the blue color goes with the Conservative Party. So we call it a blue wave. We may have a blue wave. We may have a blue minority wave at this time. Or not. We'll see. But we may have polling bias mistakes and errors that have not accounted for a swell of voters at the blue or the Conservative level. There are massive rallies, and it's not Trump. Canadians can have massive rallies, and it's not MAGA. No one's wearing a hat, guys. We're just having thousands and thousands and thousands of people show up at Pierre Poilevre's rallies. Not enough room. People they're not getting in. And this has been increasingly so in the last month since Venus and Mercury turned direct. And that's not happening for Mark Carney. And Mark Carney has the boomers anyway. They're not out there going to rallies anyway. Boomers are like, well, I'll stay home. So it's really interesting. It's very, very tight race. So tight, so tight. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some charts for you keen astrologers. So I'm not making this stuff up. I want to show you the solar return for Pierre Poilevre, which is much stronger than the solar return for Mark Carney. There's game off, a quick dip into the solar arc directions just very quickly. And we're also going to talk about doing a Horary chart and look at the transits in the election. Both Carney and Pierre Poilevre have planets in their natal chart that align with planets in Canada. That makes them both interestingly good contenders for this election. Mark Carney does not have nearly as strong planets in terms of fixed stars. You look for fixed stars. He has Algol and Malefic on his ascendant, but you look for powerful fixed stars to indicate the capacity for leadership. When Trump was running against Kamala Harris, a lot of the Vedic astrology was saying she doesn't have enough strength. She doesn't have the stars of a president in her chart. They did say that. And in this case, the similar thing I'm saying, there are massively more powerful stars in the chart of Pierre Poilevre than in Mark Carney's chart, especially Aldebaran on his Mercury, on his sun. Now, look, I know some of you are already tuned out, turned off because you're not hearing what you want, right? I know that. I get it. And the ones who are wanting a win in Canada or are conservative U.S. listeners, you're probably thinking, yay, let's keep going. But just try to get with the program and understand I'm only giving you the astrology. Even though my personal preference would be for a conservative win, it doesn't mean that that's going to bias just reading the chart. One last thing. I did a Horary reading about whether Trump would win. I did 2 of them. One in my Patreon community, maybe 2 or 3 months before the election, and then one the day before the election. Both of those Horary charts indicated that Trump would win. But I was on the record as favoring Kamala Harris, maybe because I wanted a woman to win, maybe because my bias got on the way, maybe because I started to erode my confidence in my original predictions that Trump had a stronger chart. Indeed, Trump did have a stronger chart for the win in some respects. Some people who thought Harris would win, they were like all over the fact that, she was having the eclipses in her 10th house. And normally eclipses in an angular place could indicate her Pisces 10th house, a win. But she also had Saturn transiting her 10th house and the place of her midheaven, her 10th house in Pisces. And that is an inauspicious transit. Mark Carney has Saturn transiting in Pisces. It is an inauspicious transit. Are you seeing some of the parallels? Saturn is malefic. He brings hardship. Having him at the top of the sky going up over where Mark Carney's sun and Venus are exalted is inauspicious. Having that for Harris, not only going through her 10th house, but over her chironic wound in her 10th house and her midheaven was inauspicious. In that regard, I'm saying Carney has the same kind of inauspicious cyclical stories as did, in some respects, Kamala Harris. Let's go ahead and look at the chart. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you the solar return of Pierre Poilevre. Even though I've rectified his chart to a Cancer rising, that's after a lot of hours of looking at his history, and I'm really good at rectifications. I rectified Elon Musk to a Cancer rising years before his birth time was found out. I'm not going to read his chart based on the rectification. I'm rather going to look at his solar return, and you don't need to know at birth time. A solar return chart is a return to the sun to the astronomical degree it's set at the time of birth. That's it. And then where the eastern horizon lines up at the place of birth when you cast that chart. Let's start with that, and you'll see what I mean. I'll compare it to Mark Carney. My crow has one eye. He lost one of his button eyes. I just realized that. That makes him the one-eyed crow. That makes me think of Odin, So this is one of my crows, one of Odin's birds, and he's got one eye. So that's kind of cool. Let's hope he keeps me real and true, that I don't bias the reading because I have a personal bias. Thus disclosed. By the way, I'm not MAGA. I don't vote in the United States. I think Trump's a great person. No, absolutely not. Just like clear the air, guys. I am not pro anybody, anti anyone in Canada. I'm pro my children having affordable housing and their children having affordable housing. You know what it's like to be 25 with your partner and living in a $2,800, 600 square foot apartment with 1 bedroom and both holding down jobs and barely paying the rent and trying to imagine, this is my daughter and her boyfriend, that one day you're saving money for a home. Can you imagine that? That's what's happening. That's what's happening to my daughter right now. So please understand, I care about my generations ahead, so that's why I would vote for fiscal conservatism. Okay, so and my fiscally conservative, my super woke daughter, went blue because she realizes she can't afford to live in this country. All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at the chart. I hope I'm on the right one. I might be off. So this could just be a transit chart for my class this morning. Let's grab Pierre Poilevre and Mark. Okay, Pierre Poilevre. I think this is his natal chart, right? A Cancer rising, midheaven in Aries. I've looked at asteroids around all of this. I'm not going to go into it much more, but just notice there is this sun on fixed star Aldebaran. That's where the Venus star point happened on June the 4th. It was at 14 Gemini. That's close enough to count. And 18 is it people, the young people are his allies, and that's where he's getting the significant gains. Women don't vote for him. Somehow they don't like him. And there's Chiron. Some women don't. Liberal women, for some reason, don't like him. And I don't know, they're voting on emotions. They'd rather have a gray-haired guy who looks good or something. I don't know. But Chiron and Venus could say some of the wounds he will have with the public appeal of women in general in his political life. And he's had some challenges there as well. Now, we're not going to spend much time. The moon is in the house of writing and journalism. He did writing. He was a school newspaper guy. He's a journalist type energy. He's a great debater. Debating is a third house, a communicator. The moon is in its joy. Saturn just represents sometimes getting better with age. Longer he does it, the better he is. Okay, you get the idea there. And he, of course, he's feisty, midheaven. It may be in Aries. He's a bulldog. He's a really good debater in the House of Commons. Some of you will notice that Jupiter is in the second house. Yes, that's where Mars stationed retrograde on January 6th. Mars is coming back over his Jupiter on election day. This is actually positive. Mars over Jupiter is commander in chief energy. It is not a negative situation for him. And especially if it trines his midheaven, it's going to power him up. Now let's look instead, shall we? Why not, right? At this other chart, the very stellar looking, can't find anything too wrong with it. Help me out if you see it. Solar return chart. The astronomical return of the sun to the degree at which it was when he was born. You always cast this chart for your place of birth in the ancient tradition, just so you know. Not for your current location of residence. Although you may do that as a secondary chart. Little kombucha. All right. Ooh, that's tasty. It's called Mother Love Kombucha, lavender and lemonade. Now, in a solar return chart, you take on the comportment of the ascendant. Ascendant is in Gemini. This started last June, amplifying communication, speaking, especially as Gemini energies, and talking and negotiating and being very social. Nothing more social than going around the country and getting rallies going, right? If you're having a rally, it's always a third house story, by the way, like Trump's old MAGA rally. So it's ruled by the sun on the ascendant. He's very busy being public as a leader, gathering people on the old wagon trail of rallies and events for a politician in an election. Venus is here. This is two stories in one. He may actually get some kind of public appeal at the end of the day. However, Venus is deeply combusts the sun just before her solar conjunction on June the 4th. This is indicating also the combustion of women, and it may indicate the reason why the boomers over 50, I kind of jokingly call them the Karens. Sorry, guys, if you're one of them. They are not his ally because they're invisible, or the light on his ascendant, like it's not a positive thing. And you'll also notice Jupiter is also with the ascendant, and that can be leader or luck, etc. You might notice that he has his Mercury ruler of the ascendant co-joined with Uranus, something shocking, something unexpected on fixed star Algol. Now, one thing about this is that also this is the youth, right? Youth represent Mercury, and therefore shocks and surprises coming from behind the scenes and unknown variables. I don't think the polling has captured the youth vote, and that could show up in an election as a surprise. Oh, surprise. Also, you'll notice that he has Mars in great dignity in his 11th house. Mars is at home in his kingdom, and this is the masses or the people or influence over groups. He's out there giving bring it home type, nationalistic speeches, and the people are rallying around it. You'll also notice the moon is here. Moon in an election year. Mercury rules ballots, a shock at the ballots. But because people think the liberals are going to win, some think a majority. Good luck with that. If this happens, I quit my job. The moon is with the North Node. So there's an amplification of the moon, the people, maybe popularity, public appeal. The North Node is on fixed star Alpha-Rats. I know that because my son is on that star. Fixed star Alpha-Rats brings public appeal and popularity with the masses. So again, this could be him ginning up the masses at these rallies and getting people excited about Canada and bringing on a change and fiscal conservatism and clamping down on crime, which has gotten out of control in our countries, and triple and doubled since the Trudeau government came into power, with lots of put people out in bail or repeat offenders getting back out and offending again. And so we as conservative values go, clamping down on crime is one of them. It's not a MAGA thing, guys. It's just a normal conservative platform in Canada forever. The chironic wound here, I don't know what that's doing there. It can be that it's a wounded minority government if he wins. That's not a great government. He'd have to form a coalition with Bloc Québécois and Yves-François Blanchet, which he may, in order to have a sustainable legislation passing. But that could be the chironic wound there as well. He had a lead in the election before Mark Carney stepped in and the Trump thing happened. And I don't know if you're following our story, but Carney is trying to get the election to run on fear, basically, if you ask me. A lot of only I'm the one who can fight Trump. In the meantime, he hasn't really done much. And now he's got a scandal going a couple days before the election that he did not disclose that Trump yet again suggested the 51st state idea to Mark Carney in that meeting. And he was grilled by reporters, when that meeting happened like 5 weeks ago, saying it was cordial, it was friendly, there was mutual respect. And he insinuated there was no such conversation. And now that it's been leaked by Radio Canada, there is this big scandal that he didn't tell the truth by omission. And he's lost a lot of respect by some people's eyes, and other people who are true blue liberals say, no, he was just being diplomatic, not to trigger Trump, So you can't, which way it goes, But it's influencing the election 2 days before. That's all I want to say. And one thing I want to note is that there's something in a solar return chart called profecting from the sun, but you can also profect from the ascendant without getting into all the gory details. This makes the 11th house the month of April. So if you just trust me on this without knowing the technique, this is the month of April. If this is April, the election is on the 28th. The lot of fortune for the solar return chart is on the 28th. The lot of fortune indicates where we can experience worldly success. Mars is in dignity next to the lot of fortune. The moon, the people in the North Node are all up there. This could be an indication of great fortune on the 28th of April. The 28th is a date in this chart. This is the month. This is the day. Sometimes the sky is incredibly incroyable, literal. What else can I tell you about this? Well, I would make note perhaps of the fact that we have some ongoing sky transits on the election day vis-a-vis the solar return chart. I'm going to just overlap that for us, and then you'll just get a vibe, and then we'll move into Mark Carney. So I want you to know, I'm not saying that I think Pierre Poilevre will win because I'm taking a bad chart and trying to make something good from it. This is a good chart, even to the point where you see the midheaven in Aquarius, right? With power Pluto. I know someone's going to say dictator. Power Pluto is ruled by Saturn in the 10th house of a highly visible part of the sky where everyone can see it. Okay. So that is also auspicious as an astrological delineation. But when it comes to the transiting sky over the solar return chart, let alone his natal chart, which is very positive as well. For example, in his natal chart, we have that Jupiter over his Mars, which I consider in the second house in Leo, trining a midheaven probably to be auspicious. Now, let me get the transit chart over it. That's his natal chart. That's Pierre Poilievre's natal chart on the outside wheel. I didn't mean to put it up, but here you can see the auspicious quality of this part of the sky as well. Honestly, guys, look, he's got transiting Mercury. His natal Mercury over the solar return Venus. He's got his natal Mercury over the solar return Sun, right? This is literally a positive sky. I don't know a way to make that a negative story. And the youth Mercury represents youth as well, as I've said. Over Mercury, youth or shock or sudden surprises at the ballot box here in his solar return chart. And by the way, this also represents May. And this is literally Venus over Mercury, Venus, benefic over Uranus. Again, it's a very powerful blessing of some sort, right? Venus is in her home kingdom. She's in dignity. What is she trying to give him? What is she trying to show him? What is this really for? What is this really about? This Venus in his natal chart sits in his 11th house of good spirit, which is a very, very positive house if he's rectified to a Cancer rising without knowing the rectification. A dignified Venus is blessing ballot box Mercury with shock and awe, surprise Uranus. Well, it's a blessing if everyone thinks you're going to lose, right? Obviously. Let's clear the annotations. And let me pull up the transit chart. I don't know how much longer I want to talk about this. I'd rather call a Horary, but I do have evidence in solar arc time as well. Maybe I'll just delineate verbally the solar arc results for both candidates. But first of all, let's take the transit chart and put it in place. Here we go. And I'm on April 27th right here. I've pinned it to 0 Aries, but that doesn't matter. Okay, so On April 27th, and if I give us the day of the election, April 28th, you're going to notice that we have the moon exalted, right? The moon always represents the public or the populace in an election year or for a candidate, a politician. The people on the day of the election, shock and awe. Mercury is the youth, the young people, or the ballot box. Exalted moon. This is not inauspicious. This is auspicious. Now, also, you'll notice that on the day of the election, Jupiter is on his ascendant. That is not inauspicious. Transiting Jupiter on the solar return ascendant is highly auspicious. On the day of the actual election, these things are amazingly positive. That's all I can tell you. In the day of the election, transiting Mercury is sitting here at 12 degrees. By the way, this gives Mark Carney, his Mercury's in the 12th house, a election day in which he's having a Mercury return. Not positive because it's a 12th house Mercury. Mercury, and Mercury's feral. It's not talking to enough planets, which is probably why he keeps getting himself caught up in what some people are calling lies, omissions, or untruths that are fact checked later. Mercury, and this is true, I'm not making this up. Mercury's at 12 degrees of Aries, sitting here on election day, approaching his north node on fixed star Alpharat's popularity with the masses and the people. Mercury is the ballot box. So it is a positive sky during an election, as the sky on the day of the election dovetails with the solar return age chart in an extremely positive manner. Sometimes it's also useful to look at the solar return chart after the election. When I looked at Donald Trump's solar return chart that would occur on his birthday post-election, it is extremely positive. And I'm trying to think how that could possibly be. It looked like he was in power, maybe, if he doesn't get unalived. So I don't want to do that today. It's just too much. If he wins, I will look at his solar return chart for after the election, for his birthday in June, to see how his next iteration would go. In the meantime, I'm going to look at Mark Carney's solar return. But before I do, I have some notes somewhere here on the solar arc directions technique, which I'm not going to spend time on. The video will be far too long. I want to pump it out on Saturday. I will tell you this. On the solar arc directions, transiting Jupiter is conjunct the moon, the people, the masses at 19 degrees of Virgo in the sky for Pierre Poilevre. This is extremely positive. It's in the third house at the time, so it's about people, rallies, etc. Jupiter expands the people. This is going on as he's in the buildup for the election and the election. This Jupiter moon is extremely positive. It's Jupiter moon is always a blessing. It's always positive as archetypally energies go. For an election, it's like the king and his people are one. It's the archetype of that, okay? The leader and his people, or something like that, or expanding the popularity of the people. And when Jupiter crossed over his north node in solar arc time in 2019, he was reelected to a seat by a wide margin of leadership. So he has a riding, like you guys have congressmen and they have districts. So he was reelected to his riding. And compared to the re-election 4 years ago, he rose up in terms of mass appeal in his riding of Carleton in the Ottawa area. But also he was in contention for the leadership race of the Conservative Party. He was getting people backing him. He was raising money for that, because this North Node, by the way, is just before Jupiter in this story. And so when Jupiter and his North Node came together in 2019, all right, he was reelected to his seat, but he also was in contention for the leadership of the Conservative Party. And he said no at the end of it all because he wanted to stay with his family. I know now he had a daughter who was born who has has a verbal learning disability, maybe autistic even. And so I think he stayed back for his kid, and that's a Cancer rising. They'll do things for their family, their home, their homeland, even at the expense of their career success. I just saw a video of him hugging a mom who lost her son to fentanyl overdose on the streets of Canada. And the woman was crying and sobbing in his arms. And he was like, you could tell he was tearing up. He's an emotional man. He is a Cancer rising. But if you ever know a Cancer rising, they keep their emotions close to their vest. It takes a lot for them to let you see that. All right. Now, Also in his solar art chart, Pierre Poilevre has Mercury coming into orb of Jupiter within 3 degrees of Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, a very powerful benefic. Mercury is the young people or the ballot. So between a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, right, coming into the sky for him in his solar arc and a Jupiter moon, these are very positive. Did I forget anything I wanted to tell you? There's just so much I could be talking about here. No, we're going to do Mark Carney quickly. I'm going to look at a solar return chart. I may not even bother with the whole election stuff. And then I'm going to do a Horary live. I haven't cast my own Horary chart for this election. I've done other ones with groups of people in my Patreon community. We keep seeing a Carney win. A Pierre Poilevre win. I even had a friend of mine in the United States ask me to cast one for the election. And she's a foreigner, so it gave me a different angle on it, and it still looked like a Poilievre win. And finally, something else I did, Horary, Poilievre. Oh, my dear friend Erica Robinson in the Company of Cards, I asked her to pull a Lenormand reading out for this election. She put it on her channel, I think on probably Friday, the 25th, and I'll put a link to that below. And her Lenormand said, looks more likely to be a Pierre Poilievre win. Now, she's a very hardcore Democratic type person, and that she was not, like, you could see she was kind of aghast as she looked at the cards, because she had done a reading a month ago and it looked like maybe Carney would win. But I'll tell you one thing, as Erica always mentions, the sky is mutable. And by the way, we can be friends with people and colleagues and respect each other even as we have political differences, right? So this is like a good demonstration of what it's like to rise above the polarization fray and, be able to agree to disagree, as Erica and I would say. Okay. So in the Company of Cards, go check it out. She's a fabulous reader and she's one of my dearest. Okay. So let's get going. Take a look at Mark Carney. And then we're going to call the Horary chart in live. Like, I'm doing it now, guys. I'm terrified to do it. And because it's so much weight on the world of my shoulders here right now. And getting this wrong too, getting trolled by people. But let me go ahead and look at Mark Carney next. And we're just going to pull up a couple Mark Carney charts, and then we're going to close this baby out. This is going to sync in the algorithm. If you like this kind of political content, like and subscribe. This is not going to do well on my channel. It never does when I put standalone videos like this out. I might append it to my Monday video and tell people to watch it on the back end of that as well for my Monday All Signs video for the week ahead. So Mark Carney, basically recently used Mark Carney. Here he is. Nope, that's his solar return. I'd rather just show you his natal chart for a minute. Do I still have Mark's natal? So this is a real chart. We have a birth time. He's got his ascendant on fixed star Algol. Jupiter is called prenatal in the whole sign house system. He was some kind of king or leader in another lifetime, is the best I can say with that. Midheaven in Capricorn, likely the head of a church, a pope, head of a monastery, head of a nunnery, head of a monastery, head of some hierarchical structure of religion in another life. I can see that, by the way. And you'll see that he has a stellium in his 11th house, and there's that Venus exalted in the sun. Don't forget, Venus has been going over his sun, but she's about to tip in real-time sky. 1 and 2 days after the election, she goes anaretic, drowning Gandanta, and then she sinks into the abyss of his 12th house on like the 30th of the month. And this is not good for someone trying to win an election. Women love him. No kidding. He's got Venus up there with his sun, and women are his voters. Chiron, there's still a wound there. He's got a chironic wound around that. I'm not going to talk about his personal life, but I can tell you there's some significant mother wounds going on in this man's chart, right? And it may have impacted his relationships with love. I don't know. I know he's been married forever. Don't tell me about it. And then also, the movement of Saturn in the real-time sky. Saturn is transiting right through here. That's what undid Kamala Harris for sure. Yes, he's had a Saturn return. If I really wanted to look, I could say, does a Saturn return look auspicious for rising to dominant power in this world? But I don't need to. There's enough other stuff showing me the lay of the land. He gets himself in hot water. Mercury's really a difficult planet. It's at the bending. No. Yes, no. It's just stuck in the 12th house. It's a hidden house. It's Mercury not making any major aspects to any other planets of note, although it is in a kind of a timeout corner. So it kind of looks a little feral or peregrine. It doesn't have a lot of contact. It's kind of misbehaved sometimes. It speaks things that aren't true. If you don't believe me, I can give you a dozen articles fact checking him, but it doesn't really matter. If there was a joke and a meme going on when he first came to power, about everyone made fun of him because he has these bombastic untrue statements, and he became the topic of a joke all over the media, like Mark Carney, did this and that, like sat with Queen Elizabeth. It's history. Now, in this chart, right, you can see this is the sky, right? He has eclipses going through his 11th house, and that's where his sun is for leadership. Well, Kamala Harris had eclipses going through the part of her chart that should have looked good for her too, right? Her 10th house of public reputation, where her midheaven even was, and that didn't seal the deal. So eclipses don't always make somebody the winner of a contest. This is something I'm learning as I go. There was an eclipse on September the 18th, 2024, and it was right on his sun. And then the lunar eclipse right on his moon most recently. Now, having a lunar eclipse to your moon could eclipse your public appeal. That eclipse is behind us in March, and Mars, a malefic, is nearby with Pluto, not a great planet either. So triggering a very wounded energy in the sky. And then you look at the eclipse to his sun. An eclipse to your sun, and you're running to be a leader, it could literally be an eclipse of your power to lead. But it happened in September, and he rose to the rank. So then it did up level him. So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So one way or the other, it's a complicated story to have had the eclipse right up there on the top of the chart. Now, let me be clear. That's what he says. Let me be clear. And he says, like, fundamental, catalyze. Let me be clear. He's got these, like, really keeps repeating his lines. When someone says, let me be clear, then I think they think they're not clear. It always confuses me. Like, let me be honest. Well, who isn't honest? When we had the eclipse in September on Mark Carney's sun, there is a variable one must pay attention to. The North Node was still in the sign of Aries, in the difficult house of self-undoing and backroom secrets and deals and negotiations and things that can bite you in the ass. And so the North Node was still there with that Mercury. So it wasn't a beautiful and pure eclipse within the bounds of Pisces. It was a complicated eclipse, not a strong one for him. Let's go ahead and look at his solar return. Solar return for the age that he's at, moving out of the 12th house age. By the way, Pierre Poilevre is in a positive profection age. And because I don't do math on the fly, but I knew the answer, he's either in his 10th or 11th house age. Let me remember how old that man is. Pierre Poilevre was born in June of 1979. So that makes him, I'm doing the math, 81 and 25. So 1981. Yeah. So sorry. I'm doing math on the fly, so bear with me. Dyscalculia. So 21 years and then 24 years. He's 46 years old. No. 2024, 24, 34, 44, 45. He's 45 years old. I hope I got that right. Anyway, 40, 1, 2, 3, 4. He's in his 10th house age. So Pierre Poilevre at 45 years old is in his 10th house age. All right, that's what I got for you. 10th house age is the age of ascending to popular and public appeal at the top of the sky in one's career and reputation, and it is a career age. All right, so he started the election in a career age. He's still in the career age in the middle of the election, whereas, unfortunately, for Mark Carney, he started the election in the 12th house age, the dungeon here, and then on his birthday, on March the 16th, he slipped into the first house age, just like Kamala Harris did just before the election, and she lost. Again, I think it's about starting something ambitious and new in an age of endings. The 12th is an ending age, a letting go, a releasing. Now, the next thing I want to point out is the solar return, and then we'll do the horary, and then I'll get this damn thing dropped out as fast as I can hopefully on Saturday, so people have a chance to watch it before the election. So recently used solar return. I have it in my system. I already cast it. Mark Carney's solar return chart puts him as a Libra rising, trying to find balance, sometimes being a people pleaser. You just kind of take on the mantle, or you don the characteristics of this story. This solar return chart begins in the month of March and lasts until next March, so it encompasses our election season. And in his solar return chart, he's got the moon behind him. Now, that's interesting because sometimes it's a popular, people appealing. Women are ruled by Libra because it's a Venus ruled sign. Could be that. And his main constituency has been a lot of liberal boomer women, and you'll see that the women are in the house of the public. That's the public for It's called 10th house from the 10th. So he's got women in the house of the public. Do you notice that Venus is retrograde? Do you notice so is Mercury, the ballot box guy? And there's a chironic wound. They're going to turn around. The public appeal that he was getting will have turned around after his birthday, and indeed it did. And then the gap began to close tighter and tighter. Now, the other element going on in the sky in his solar return is it's not auspicious to have Mars fallen in Cancer on the midheaven. Oops, he's fallen and he can't get up. Something is disabling his 29-degree Gandanta drowning midheaven. Midheaven is at a turbulent, challenging, a difficult degree. And then Mars is also malefic, and it's in the sign of its fall, baked into the midheaven. Tell me if you're an astrologer and you think that Mark Carney is going to win. I want to know how. Tell me how you think this looks good. I'd love to know. Mars is square the moon, the people. It's not an auspicious chart. The people are behind him, not in front of him. This is the back end of the solar return, right? Not the front end, because his birthday is in March and we perfect from the ascendant. We can also perfect from the sun. This means that this is the month of March. This is the month of April. April is got no planets in there, but it's Scorpio ruled by Mars, cutting, ending, and severing fallen Mars on the midheaven. You can read that cannot be auspicious, or it could be auspicious. I don't think it's auspicious. Scorpio, second house, ruled by Mars, falling, debilitated in a sign of fall on the midheaven, which is a drowning Gandanta midheaven. So not too auspicious in my humble opinion. If we profect, okay, moving forward from the sun, this is the month here of March. This is April. Okay, in April, he has a chironic wound connected to ballots, young people, women, popular appeal, something and below the horizon, retrograde. Again, that is representing the month of April. In a lot of things that have been going on, a lot of the momentum started to dramatically shift around the 21st. This is actually a date in this technique, right? This 19th to 21st of the month of April. That's when polls began to close the gap. So go back and watch our polling and watch the gap close. You'll see around the time of Chiron, the 21st of April, this gap between conservatives and liberals began to suddenly close. So to make of it what you will, but that is exactly how it went in terms of the polling margins. Jupiter bakes in a sign of exile, not a positive thing. If you want to be a leader, Jupiter is in his exile. Well, exiled from what? Exiled from the leadership, exiled from the kingdom of this place here. This is the media kingdom, by the way. You know, social media, we'll see. But it's just a baking in an inauspicious placement for Jupiter, for Mars on the midheaven, for the moon behind him, not in front of him. You know, with Venus where Venus is, and this is the ruler of the ascendant, it's a little bit like mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all. When the ruler of the ascendant falls into the seventh house, it's always a challenge if you're born with that. But then you add it's Venus, right? So it's like, that's why like mirror, mirror on the wall, maybe his own esteem of himself and his capability to win, you know. One thing I will say, I did not like how he treated the CBC reporter, Rosemary Barton, when she asked a very good question in the beginning of his campaign. He said, Rosemary, look into yourself, Rosemary. Where is that question coming from? And he's more than once dismissed female reporters in the questioning room in a condescending tone. So this can also be part of what we're seeing. Maybe some women saw that and they thought, well, I'm not voting for that guy. Maybe there's an underestimation of the power of women to perceive, you know, dismissal energy towards other women. I don't even like Rosemary Barton, the CBC. I don't want any woman to be dismissed like that. It was really, really awful. All right. Now, if you were just to do this before we do the horary, give me a sec. If you were simply to take his natal chart and stick it over, right? Oh, and on election day. And then and on election day, what's going on the outside wheel, right? And on election day. His ascendant, no, skip the ascendant. It's just the day of the election because the ascendant keeps moving all day long. That won't work. On the day of the election, nothing is powering up his midheaven in particular in a direct transit. Like nothing's really saying, yay, midheaven, go, except for the trine to Venus. I'll give him that. Venus is at 28 degrees, almost 29, 56 minutes. So Venus will be on the day of the election, tumbling into the anaretic 29th degree. Okay. And by midday in Vancouver, Canada. So that's going to lead to problems. But that Venus is also trying to help the midheaven, which is drowning. So there's something going on that could be construed as positive, possibly, and the North Node trining the midheaven could be construed on election day as positive. He's in the middle, full throttle of a nodal return, full nodal return on the sun, a lot of intensity, a lot of fated circumstances running through his sky, no doubt about it. Saturn is a malefic on his sun, on his North Node, on his lot of fortune. Not a positive story. I'm sorry. That's just not, to me, a positive thing. Saturn is still a constrainer, a constrictor, and a malefic. End of the deal. In the 6th house of bad fortune. So in the solar return chart, this overlay on election day is not the most auspicious, as I keep saying. I sound like a broken record. And then the moon on election day sits on Uranus on Algol in his 8th house. The 8th house is a very difficult house. It has to do with secrets. It has to do with, timeout corners and hidden variables, and it's a house of death. So yeah, to be considered, isn't it, guys? Very fascinating. Let's go ahead and also show you one more sky, and then we'll do the horary. I know I'm talking fast. Over on the outside wheel is his natal story, right? This is his natal story on the outside wheel. And in the inside wheel is his solar return chart. So you can see a few things that are going on in his life, like he's having a Mercury return period. I still have the solar. Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah, solar return natal chart. So the Mercury return is building into this storyline. But I wanted to just say, when you put his own sky, not the transiting sky for the election, on the outside wheel of the chart, right, you get some more stories going here. You'll notice that as his natal Venus is exalted in Pisces with his sun, that these are getting, and Chiron and Saturn, these are getting all muddled up here in the current sky story. That's why he's having a Saturn return in the house of bad fortune. Yeah, it's a house of work and livelihood, but Mars fallen at the top of the sky suggests problems, not success. So I'm not sure about what to say about that. I really don't feel like it could be coded as positive. You want to say exalted Venus in the house of work, but there's Chiron there and Mars is fallen. So again, trining it. So it's like complicated. To say the very least, it's complicated. North Node is expanding the Jupiter in fall. Jupiter, that simply means that Jupiter and his North Node are aligned, but Jupiter is also in the condition of the solar return chart of detriment, not fall, exile. So being exiled from power, or being exiled from one's, goodness or whatever. And, Mars is a malefic coming into contact with his South Node. So the solar return South Node, baked in on his birthday at 27 degrees of Virgo, is literally getting entangled with his very difficult stellium in his 5th house, whole sign 5th house, which is complicated as well. So a malefic on the South Node in the house of self-undoing. Just, you can see what I'm saying. There's more challenges in his chart. He's born with Algol on his ascendant, and he can lose his head. Head of what? Head of state. That's why Trump was almost on the ear bullet thing, because decapitation, capitate, right? Head, capital, head, kaput, head. So when you're the head of state, you can lose your head. He is the head of state. He's our interim prime minister, and he's got a lot of action on his ascendant with Algol Uranus right now. And Algol on the midheaven of Justin Trudeau got him out of power. I don't see Algol going over Mark Carney's ascendant looking like, yay, you just won the election. He's already the prime minister of Canada. He can be decapitated from that position of power. Let's do the horary. I'm actually anxious. I'm going to pause the recording while I pull it up. There are different ways to cast a horary on an election. One of them is I could say, will Pierre Poilevre win? Or will Mark Carney win? I'm not using that technique. I'm using the technique where I'm saying who will win. And it's based on ascribing the ruler of the 10th house cusp to the person already in power, which is Mark Carney. He is our prime minister. He wasn't elected, but that's how it works in Canada. He's the interim prime minister. He took over when Trudeau stepped down. And then the other thing is that, hang on, guys. Then I've got dry eyes. And then what happens next is that the party opposite, the person opposite, is the ruler of the 4th house cusp, which represents the opposing party or people to the one in power. So It's complicated. I took a quick peek at it. I cast the chart real time. I wasn't looking at the sky to find a perfect time. Okay, I was just throwing all caution to the wind on this baby. So this is Regiomontana's house system used by me and Horary based on the teachings of John Frawley and my teacher, Adam Ellenbus. That's my upline. So technically, we're looking at it like this. There is no other way to do this. This is the 10th house cusp. It is Taurus. This is the 4th house cusp. It is Scorpio. That means that Venus represents Mark Carney, the one in power, the ruler of the 10th house cusp. That's Venus. In the 8th house was Saturn, North Node. And we also can say, and by the way, also Neptune, right? Because we're not using a whole sign house system. And then we can also say, therefore, the ruler of the 4th house cusp, representing the oppositional energy to the 10th house ruler, is Mars on the lot of fortune at the time of my question in the sign of Leo. Well, first of all, 8th house, 12th house placements are both negative for both candidates. So neither one has got a super strong placement. That's probably because if either one wins, neither is going to have a majority government, most likely, because the gap is narrowed so deeply and there's no longer likely a majority conservative win. If you ask me, it means they're both in a position of weakness coming into the election. I said, who will be the next prime minister, by the way, because I wanted to be clear in case someone won the election and they did another ballot, check it and they had to overturn it. So I wanted to be simple. Who will win the next election? And who will be the PM, prime minister. PM is prime minister. Now, the lot of fortune is about worldly success. And I already mentioned that in the solar arc time, the lot of fortune is connected to a strong position for Pierre Poilevre. In solar arc time, was it the lot of fortune in the solar arc, or was it another issue? See, I had too many notes and too many things about this. But there was some position for Pierre Poilevre where we saw a positive relationship to the lot of fortune in the sky. Now, the lot of fortune could mean worldly success and fortune, and Mars is strong in Leo. He doesn't mind fire signs, and he's opposite Pluto. Well, Pluto is many things. There's oppositional energies. There's powers that be. To be clear, in Canada, the powers that oppose Pierre Poilevre are legacy media, and the established elite or old money that have been running the government for a while. That's my humble opinion. We could say that's part of what's going on here. Mark Carney happens to be a globalist. He happens to be the former person who ran a division of Brookfield Assets. He has assets in and stock shares in Brookfield Management. He has an offshore revenue account that's tied to Brookfield Assets. But technically, he hasn't paid taxes in Canada, I don't think, for a decade, because he's got a passport for England and Ireland. It's kind of funny, isn't it? But anyway, So this is just, I think, this is big, intense, power struggle energy that Pierre Poilevre, as Mars, or as the party, a conservative party, is going through. One of the things I think is positive, and it's just positive no matter which way I swipe the sky, Mercury represents the ballot box, the electorate. Well, the electorate is the moon, but Mercury represents the tabulations, the ballot box, the casting of a vote. And Mercury at 10 degrees of Aries is flowing to Mars and the lot of fortune. So in the 9th house of government issues quite often. So that's auspicious. I don't see a problem with that. In a whole sign way, Mars and the whole sign flow to the sun and moon. Well, no, not really to the moon up here, the people, the masses, right? And the chironic wound. And again, is it because there's a squeaking by minority government, which is kind of to be kneecapped as you go into office, in which you're not able to make any policy legislation happen without support of another party. And the only party that would ever support him is Bloc Québécois at this point. So he could get some alliances with Bloc Québécois. The NDP has fallen apart here. Now, and the votes the NDP would have gone to the Liberals. Part of the Liberal ascendancy is they've gotten lots of the NDP party votes over to them, as for some reason our Jagmeet Singh, the owner of the leader of the NDP, did what can be considered like a campaign at a level of a high school, someone running from the high school president. So that didn't work out so well for the NDP. We go over to Mark Carney in the Horary, because what you do in this kind of chart is you compare You compare the strength of the candidates. Okay. So it's not like it's not like who will win. It's a different kind of technique. I might do another one of those before the election. So we see strength and weaknesses for both. Weaknesses by house placement, strength definitely for Mark Carney as he's in Venus exaltation. There's a misunderstanding about an exalted planet, I must declare. That which rises falls and that which falls rises. So when you're born with a fallen planet, that would be say Venus and Virgo, you tend to rise from the bottom, right? You're like, you hard scrabble your way to success. But when you have an exalted Venus or any planet, she's on a pedestal and she can fall. So there is that caveat to say that he's in a position of height, but could he fall? And technically that Venus is going to hit the drowning degree. And then I'm recording this on April 26th, and then by the 30th fall into the Aries debility sign for her. So does this mean he's hit a peak and he can fall, or does it mean he's going to win? North Node just speaks of matters that are fated, and Saturn is a malefic. One way or the other, Saturn is still a difficult planet. So both of these, Pierre Poilevre has to oppose Pluto, and then Mark Carney has a malefic hugging him, and he's going to move from the 28th degree into the drowning degree very shortly. So as I said, it's neck and neck. It's one of those elections where I'm not sure the Horary is going to give me the answer. Jupiter rules Mark Carney, and he's in a sign of detriment or exile. And you can see that this is a Jupiter ray to cross into another house. And when you're 3 degrees away from the cusp, you're allowed to jump the planet over. So from the height of the 10th house, which is the seat of the king, the 10th house is the king's seat. Jupiter is about to leave the king's seat. And by the way, Mark Carney is in the king's seat, the prime minister's seat, and he's got to leave that house. So that can be a sign that Mark Carney's position is about to end, as the planet that rules him is allowed to jump from 20 to 21 into the next house. And it indicates a change of stature. And that will still be a Jupiter exiled, right? Not in good condition. The sun rules Leo, which is this case the candidate for the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilevre, whereas Mark Carney is ruled by detriment, a planet in detriment. The sun in Taurus is just the sun in Taurus. It's neither weak or strong. It's just what it is. It's a nice earthy based sun. But you'll notice that the sun at 6 degrees is within 3 degrees of the 8 degree cusp. In fact, this is almost a 7 degree sun, 6 degrees and 50 minutes, is about to jump the fence into the 10th house of the seat of the king. If I only went with the story of rulership and I was to say, oh, look at that, the planet that rules Mark Carney is about to jump out of power, out of the seat of the king. Oh, look at that, the planet that rules Pierre Poilevre is about to jump into the seat of the king. Then I would call this a regime change, a change of seats of power. And that's what I've got for you. If you see anything I didn't see, let me know in the comments. Don't troll me. I can allow for fiscal conservative values in my own country. It's not like the United States. Our Conservative Party is not the same as yours. It's not the same as the Republican Party. We don't have a religious Tea Party, for one thing. And we don't have a big anti-abortion contingency for another, and all of that. So if you get trolling on me as an American, to stop. That's not what we have going on here. But I would like my kids to be able to afford a home and have wages that allow them to save some money. I have 2 children, 35 and 25. They're not doing well. The only reason my son has a home is his wife inherited money from the death of her family. And there's a new report that comes out that shows that it's going to be the haves and have-nots, and that if our economy doesn't start to grow and change, we're going to end up with a serious problem where it's only legacy wealth from parents passed on to kids that allows for those kids to get a home and everyone else be damned. Everyone else be damned. And I don't mind developing our resources, gas and oil. I'm okay with that, guys, because until someone shows me a renewable resource that works, that we have enough, our power grid, hydroelectric, doesn't have enough energy to make everybody drive electric cars. We don't have the capacity to sustain it. So until you have an alternative, there's no point in carbon taxing and punishing people for using the only resources that we have to heat your home in the north where it's freezing. Policies that are ideological, ideologues make them and don't have on the ground common sense and cause catastrophic economic problems in my country. I don't agree with that. I really don't. I think we should be able to use our natural resources in ways that are also working for environmental sustainability and alternate sources of power. I'm calling it again in the intro. I'm calling it the extra. by a margin. I do believe Pierre Poilevre will win the election and be the next Canadian prime minister, and most likely a minority government. I might call the video "Blue Wave" just for, clickbait appeal, but the wave will mean he went from losing to finally maybe just winning. That's my hope. I tried to read it as well as I could. I know some of you think I'm biased. I am. I declared up front that for the first time in my life, I'm 63 years old. I'm going to the voting booth on Monday and I'm casting my vote in my home country for the first time in my life. I lived in the United States for nearly 20 years, but I had a visa. I wasn't a citizen. I could not vote. And I missed voting in my own country so many years that I just got politically apathetic. But for the first time in my life, I'm motivated to cast a vote. So there you go. Ciao, everybody.